first, I just wanted to push back a little bit on the idea that there's an inherent difficulty in separation between religion and politics in Islam, and perhaps in the modern period, but definitely in the pre-modern period, we see a lot of diversity, and I think that's something of a possibility for Muslims to look forward to. So my question is about the importance and meaning of equality to democracy. And can you have a democracy where each person's vote or each person's, subjectivity in the court system is not equal? Is that still democratic? Because, as you say, these Islamist parties, for example, think that perhaps Muslims are more of a citizen than Christians, or that men are more of a citizen than women, and is that actually acceptable in a democratic system to you? And also, I was wondering about this idea that the supply has to be fulfilled when there's a demand. So if there's a demand that women should wear hijab, or there's a demand that we need to have religious education in schools, does that really need to be supplied? And what are the limits of that? If there's a demand that we kill off a certain minority population that we don't like, so is that really, do we have to supply what people demand if it's inherently, in my view, wrong? Thank you.
Sadaf is actually an old friend. It's really nice to see you. And I knew you were going to ask a really tough question. So, look, I don't want to get into a debate about Islamic history and the role of Islamic law throughout the centuries. So I think there was a lot of diversity of debate in terms of the relationship between the state and the clerics. And I would say that in some Islamic societies, there was a degree of secularism in the sense that there was separation between mosque and state, if that's what we mean by secularism. But what I'm talking about more broadly is religion and politics. There wasn't a separation between religion and politics throughout Islamic history, in the sense that Islamic law was always very much part of the public discourse. It was part of the decision-making process. Clerics had influence on the decisions of the executive at the end of the day. So just kind of, I'm sure you would probably have a response to that. I think for these societies today to remain democratic, I think the key consideration is, do liberals, let's say there's an Islamic party in power. The key issue is, do liberals have full opportunity and equality in the political process where they can advocate for their views and try to reverse something they disagree with? Let's say that Islamists ban alcohol, to give an obvious, somewhat stereotypical example, ban alcohol. Some liberals will disagree with that. Do they have a chance to work through the democratic process and advocate through the court system, through the electoral process in terms of trying to win the next election or winning local elections so they can start to overturn some of these Islamic provisions? If they're denied that opportunity, then that's no longer democratic, because you always have to have recourse to change laws that you disagree with in a democratic process. If that's taken away, that's where I would draw the red line. Now, but I would kind of pose the question back to you. I don't really have an answer to the question of how far can elected majorities go. There's a very rich debate in political theory about what majorities can and cannot do. And I think different societies have to kind of make those determinations accordingly. Here in the US, we have a Bill of Rights. That's where our fundamental red lines are. But in a place like Switzerland, you have a situation where minarets are banned, or in France, where wearing niqab, the face veil, is banned. That, in some sense, is illiberal because you're denying people personal freedom and something that is very important to them as citizens. So different societies draw the line in different places. I think we can all agree that killing off minority populations, I think there's a universal consensus that majorities cannot do that, obviously. But I think those clear-cut cases are obvious, but it becomes much more difficult when we're talking about things that you can kind of see different arguments for it. What would you say about banning alcohol? What would you say about segregation of sexes? What would you say about the state taking on a role in terms of disseminating a particular vision of religion? Should the state be involved in promoting a certain kind of religious observance? Let's say they're not forcing it, but they're using the state apparatus to promote these ideas. There's a lot of difficult debates there, and I think that in some sense, it can't be for us as Americans to decide what those red lines are. I think it has to be up to those societies through an inclusive democratic process to decide what are the boundaries of political contestation. Where do they put the red lines? And they really haven't had those debates in any great degree yet, and that's going to take time, and that's a difficult, sometimes bloody process.